Thank you for the warm welcome, Gail, and for being our host today. And this is, as Gail said, the Google Forms training, and this is just an introductory session. Of course, we only have 45 minutes, and it's a pretty powerful tool, so you can only cover so much in 45 minutes. Elizabeth and I may end up talking really fast, so I apologize to our ASL interpreters if we do that. About us, I am Susan Wetenkamp-Brandt. I'm the Senior Manager for Educational Technology and Digital Literacy at Literacy Minnesota, and I am the leader of our statewide distance learning team. And in that capacity, I work with my colleague Elizabeth Bennett, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I do work part-time for Literacy Minnesota as the statewide distance learning coordinator, but my main job is as an intermediate ESL teacher at Burnsville School for Adults. So I'll be showing you a little bit about how I use Google Forms in my classroom and in my teaching.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And you'll see that we have our distance learning support desk email address listed on the slide here. Both Elizabeth and I are agents on that support desk. So if you email that email address, you will actually be contacting both of us as well as several other folks. So it's a great way to get the response from the person who is most knowledgeable about your question. So I always recommend using that email address if you have a question about anything distance learning in Minnesota ABE. All right, our agenda for today, we're going to start out with just a really basic introduction of what's a form, why would you want to make one? I have a form I'm going to have in the text chat as a link that you can open up and complete so that we can then go look at the responses. One of the things that I find is really interesting about forms is the way the data is displayed depends on the kind of question. So the form that I'll ask you to fill out has a number of different kinds of questions, and then we can look at, okay, what does that look like as the teacher when I get the information back from the people who complete it? And then Elizabeth has several examples of forms as quizzes that she's going to show you that she's used in her classroom in Burnsville. And then she's going to walk you through how to make a form, add questions, those different question types that I talked about, and how to make that form into a quiz for your students. And then hopefully, if we have time, I'll be showing you some of the settings kind of beyond the basics, how to collect email addresses from folks, making sure that the confirmation message they get when they complete the form is meaningful, and then also how do you get notified by email when somebody completes your form. So that's a lot to cover in 45 minutes, so let's get started. All right, what is a Google form? So it is part of the Google Suite, or I think they have a different name for it now, Google Workspace, alongside Docs and Slides and other tools like that that you might be more familiar with. And it is an online form for collecting responses from a group of people, and you can view the results of those either as individual responses, or you get a summary graph that is sometimes a pie chart and sometimes a bar chart, and we'll look at that. Or you can also open up a spreadsheet that displays all the responses in that format. And that's sometimes very useful if you want to archive your data. Forms can be distributed by email, but you can also put them in your Google Classroom. You can put a link or even embed it into your website. There's lots of different ways to distribute a Google form. If you're using other communication tools in your classroom, like Remind or WhatsApp, you can put the links to those things in whatever communication tool you're using. So examples of things you might do with a form: surveys, evaluations, appointment signups, volunteer applications, help requests. You could do quizzes, you can do exit tickets, kind of anything where you want your students or your volunteers or whoever you're communicating with to communicate with you and to tell you their thoughts on questions. So right now, for example, in our program at our learning centers, we are considering whether or not to drop our requirement that all students and teachers wear masks in classrooms. That's currently the policy. But now that the school districts in our area have dropped their requirements, we're considering whether or not we should do so also. And so we have a Google form right now that we're distributing to learners and volunteers and staff saying, what do you think? What do you want? And that's anonymous, so people can feel free to tell us what they really think. So that's just one example of how you might use a form in your program. Oh, whoops, I actually don't want to go to this slide yet. So now that we have kind of talked a little bit about forms, we're actually going to do one. And I think Gail has already got that in the text chat for you. So if you open up your text chat, you can click on that link and go through and fill out the form. It's only about 6 questions. It should go pretty quickly. And then I'm going to stop sharing my slides and we will go over and look at the results. You don't see the link? Gail, can you post it again in the chat?
Yes, I'll post it right now.
Oh, and it looks like Elizabeth put it in too. Are you seeing it now?
Yeah, just as a clarification, the link is in the Zoom chat. So you want to click on those blue letters in the chat, not on the slide where it says, what is a Google form?
Yes. I'm actually going to stop sharing that so I can go over to the browser and bring that up. And it looks like folks are filling out the form. We have 18 responses so far. And I know we have 55 folks in the room, so I'll wait for us to get a few more responses in before we go through the results. All right, 30-second warning. Nope, got one more. All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see this a little better. Does that look good for everyone? All right, not hearing any no's, so I think folks can see that. So this is the back end of the form that you just completed. And if I click over here, I can see the questions, the form as I built it, but here's the response tab. And by default, when you go to the response tab to see what folks have answered on your form, you get the summary view, which is where you're going to get those charts displaying everybody's responses together. So depending on the kind of question, they're displayed differently. So this is a multiple choice question and it displays as a pie chart. And you know, you can see here are the responses. We had a few folks answer the other, right, and put in their own answer, and then a number of folks who are responding to the pre-made multiple choice questions. So it looks like the number one reason people are here is that they need help with Google tools. So hopefully we can provide that for you. And then the number two reason is folks make a lot of forms, but they want to improve how they use them. And I hope that we can help you with that as well. All right, this is another kind of multiple choice question, but if you'll remember when you filled it out, this one was a drop-down menu instead of the radio buttons to select. But in the back end, it displays exactly the same way, except that there wasn't, and there can't be an other option where you fill in your own answer. So if you have questions where you really want people to be able to provide their own response, you're going to want to use the radio button style. If you want to limit people to only the choices that you're providing, then the drop-down menu can work. This was a different kind of question. This was a rating question on a scale of 1 to 5, right? And so you can see that this displays, we've got, most people saying that it's pretty easy or at least neutral. And one person over here saying, actually, yes, one person saying that, no, this is really difficult for me. And then this was another multiple choice type question, except that it is, it's the multi-answer, so you can choose more than one. And those are displayed as this kind of a bar chart. And so then you can see the percentages of people who answered the different tools. And it looks like the most popular tools are Docs and Gmail. And very few people are using or answered other, but we've got one Jamboard, one Draw, and one Tasks. Now, this is where things really get interesting. This last question is intended to create a branching scenario where, depending on your answer, you go to a different part of the form. So most of the folks in this group will have gone to the section for people who answered, no, I am not a certified educator. But at least one or two, oh, looks like just one, went to the page for if you are certified. So what happens is that I've got two different sections set up. If you are certified, I asked you another question, would you recommend it? And why or why not? So this is the one person who responded on that question. If you got the no, I'm not certified, I didn't ask you any follow-up questions. It just gave you the link to find out about getting certified. And I'll go over to the questions page so you can see how that looks when you're building it. So this is how that question looks. And to get this functionality, you have to dig a little bit. It's not real obvious. You have to go into this little 3-dot menu on your question, and you want to find the option that says go to section based on answer. And once you turn that setting on, you get these additional options here on your multiple choice questions that says, okay, where to go. And by default, go to the next section is selected. But what I have done then is I've added section 2, how to become a Google certified educator, and section 3, questions for people who are already certified. So once I've built those sections, then I can tell this question where to go. And then after this one, I don't want it to send you to section 3 because you don't have any need to answer those questions. So instead, I'm going to have it just submit the form. And that's how you can use Google Forms to do branching and only deliver the questions that are relevant to the person that you're working with. And I see there's some chat going on. Elizabeth, have you been keeping an eye on that? Is there anything I should be responding to?
Maybe if you just want to go back up to the top of the form and show those 3 different tabs for where you can edit it and where you can see the responses and then the settings.
Sounds good, sure. So when I'm here in my form, this is the questions page. This is where I can edit it, add questions, add sections. I can put in a video from YouTube if I want somebody to watch something and then respond to it. All of that editing is done on this questions page. Then there's responses, which is here are all the graphs. And then I didn't show this yet, but I would like to, which is there's different ways to see this. So we can also look at the results per question. And then I can see all the individual responses to this particular question. And you can see there's 16 responses. Who were they? If you did have people signing in with their email addresses, you'd be able to see who those individuals were. I didn't on this, it's an anonymous form. And then you can also see individual responses. So if I wanted to see any particular person, all of their responses in one place, I go here to individual. And then I can see, okay, this person, how did they answer these questions? And you'll see they didn't answer these last 2. They didn't see this section because they answered no here and got this text instead. And then the other way that you can view results is as a spreadsheet, and that link is right here. So if I want to see and archive my results, I can click on that link and then I'll get the option to create a new spreadsheet. I'm going to create that. And it will open up. And now I've got all of the results in a spreadsheet format. One of the really nice things about the spreadsheet, it does give you a timestamp. So this is really handy if you've got a form that you've got open for a long period of time and you want to go back and see when people were filling it out. Elizabeth and I use that for folks requesting CEUs for things, and we want to connect their request for CEUs with something else that they were completing in the course. And so we can go back and look at the timestamp and match up who did this form and match it up with this other task they were doing. And then of course you can also, save these, download them as a spreadsheet, do any of the data manipulation you would do with a spreadsheet. Couple of other quick things on this responses page is that you can print individual responses if you need to that. You can delete responses too. So if you want to test the form yourself and go through and make sure it just works, but you don't want your response to be part of your data set, you can then delete your response after you fill it out. All right, any other questions on how to view the results? Before we turn it over to Elizabeth to talk about her classroom examples.
Susan, would you show the send button and how you actually get the link and other ways to share the form with people?
That is a great question. And yes, I can. So right up here at the top, big purple button that says send. If I click on that, I've got options for how I want to distribute this. By default, it's just going to be an email. And I put the email address here of the person or group that I want to distribute it to. And then I can type a message. What do I actually want to say about this form? I can put the form directly in the body of the email if I want to do that. And then I click send. Another option, and the one I most frequently use, is to just get the link. So that's how we distributed the form in this Zoom call. I got the link, and then I gave that link to Gail and Elizabeth, and they put that in the text chat, and you all opened it from the link. And that's also great for putting on a website or any other mechanism where you can just share a link, right? You can also embed the form itself. If you have a website where you can edit and you can put in HTML code, you can grab this code block paste it into your website, and then the form itself will display in the website page. So they don't have to go to a separate tab or a separate browser window to complete the form. It will be right in the page itself. And then here's where you can collect emails. So I don't have that turned on because I wanted my form to be anonymous. But if you are using it with students and you really want to know how to associate a particular person's response with that person, you might turn on collect emails, and then you'll know this response came from this person. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. There's another question about if you do it by sending by email, is that private? Like, do all the recipients see all the other recipients' email addresses?
I'm not completely sure, but I think so, yes. Just as with any other email that you would send, they would see all the addresses listed in the to field of your email. I think so. I haven't checked that in a while, but I think that's correct. Which is why possibly you might want to use a group email address or some other way to distribute your link, such as through your Google Classroom or your other learning management system, or on a website, or just in your Zoom class or your Google Meet class.
And then we have a question from Alicia about, in your experience, do you get more results if you put the form directly into the email?
Not in my case, but I am mostly working with professionals. So most of the forms I send to are employees at my organization or other colleagues that I'm working with. And so my response rates are very high. It might be different if you're working on a form where responses are more optional. And I think that might make it more likely because they can see that the form is only 5 questions long and it's multiple choice and I can finish it in 2 minutes, right? If you don't know how long the form is, you might be more reluctant to click the link and go, oh, wow, it's 20 questions. I'm not doing this, right?
Yeah. And I would say also, it might depend on the type of email that your recipients are using. If they're using Gmail, which is a Google product, it'll probably work pretty nicely. If they're using a different kind of email, it might not work so well. So it might work better actually to send the link in that case. And then there's another question says, I think I heard somewhere that you can have results show up directly on a Google slide, or maybe the form itself. Do you know anything about this?
I have not explored that, but it would be really interesting if we could. And maybe while Elizabeth is presenting her section, I will dig around and see if I can find it.
Okay.
This is a great question.
Yeah.
Any other questions before I turn it back over to Elizabeth? All right, not hearing any, so I'm going to bring the slide deck back up here and take it away, Elizabeth.
Oh, okay, so you're just sharing your screen. Can I share my screen, Susan?
Go right ahead, Elizabeth. I stopped sharing. You can take it over.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I'm going to need you to share because I'm using a different device and my settings are not correct. So sorry about that.
No problem.
All right. But I wasn't going to take you to these forms anyway. Notice that there is blue text on each one of these slides. So when you go to the participant folder after the presentation, you can get a PDF copy of the slides. And then when you click on that blue text, that is a live link. So it will take you to the actual form and you can see it as a student would see the entire form. Just a couple examples. I used this one recently in my ESL class. We had a word study lesson on the R influenced O sound. And I actually gave a spelling test, just like a little mini practice spelling test in class. And I'm using HiFlex. So my in-person students got out their phones and took the quiz on their phones, and my online students were able to click the link and do the quiz at home. So I would say the word and they would type the word in the form, and it worked really nicely. And another thing you can do if the form is set up as a quiz, you can set it to give feedback automatically. So I did that for all of those questions. You can see on the left, I typed in some possible answers that I thought my students might write to be correct. I didn't really care if they wrote short versus shorts, because the point of the lesson was that or sound in the middle. And I didn't care if they capitalized it or not. I wanted to try to give as much credit as possible for getting that middle vowel sound. So as soon as they submitted the form, they were able to see right away if they had typed one of those correct answers, and they would get the point for it. And then same thing for the multiple choice questions. You can set the correct response, and then they can see the correct answer after they've submitted the form. And for that final one, that was just kind of an exit ticket reflection question. How do you feel about this learning target? And you can set it so actually all three of those answers are considered correct, and students would earn a point no matter which question or which answer they chose for that question. So that's one way I've used quizzes in my ESL class. Another way that I've used it, this was in a different context with more first language English speakers, but I used it as an assessment as part of a TVM lesson. So students had watched a video that I made about using Khan Academy, and then they had to go in and take this quiz, and I was able to, you can add images to the quiz. So I put in this screenshot from my teacher view of Khan Academy and asked students to reflect, like, what have you learned about using Khan Academy? What do you think each one of these students should do so that they, are able to learn more math from using Khan Academy? Next. I have also used it as just kind of a weekly check-in form. So if you have students who are like on an independent learning contract, not necessarily coming to synchronous classes regularly, doing a lot of independent work on their own, I would ask them to complete this form every week so that I could just kind of check in with them, and they would give me some feedback about what they'd been working on, what went well for them, what was challenging, and just as kind of a way to keep them a little more accountable for their work and for me to support them if they needed support. And then this last one was actually not set up as a quiz with points, because that wasn't really my purpose for using it. It was just a regular form. But we had done a writing project in class, and when students were ready to have me or my co-teacher look at their writing and give them some feedback, they would submit this form just to check, like, did you actually go through the revising and editing checklist yourself? What do you think are the strengths of your writing? What do you like about what you wrote? And then choose some specific things that you would like feedback on. Thanks. All right, and then one more thing I wanted to mention. When you I think a lot of you are probably using Google Classroom. And there's this really nice feature in Google Classroom where you can create a quiz assignment. And that is automatically a Google form set to be a quiz. And you can find that form either in Google Classroom or in the Classroom folder of your Google Drive. You just want to be careful to know what the default settings are and make changes as needed. If you want to go to the next slide, Susan. So there's a really nice feature I like to use, which is grade importing. So once you grade students' quizzes in the form, you can click another button in Google Classroom and it automatically pulls all those scores into your Google Classroom. But Google tells you grade importing automatically limits each form to 1 response per user, collects email addresses, and restricts responses to users in your domain. So that's important because if you have students who are not signed into their school district email accounts, then they might not be able to access the form until they sign in. So this isn't a big deal if your students are accessing the form through Google Classroom because they'll automatically be signed in to Google through their Google account. But say you send them the link to the form in a text message or a WhatsApp message, or you send the link in an email to their email that is not their school district email, then they might not be able to access the form. So just be aware of that and play around with it. I would, on the next slide, I have a pro tip for you. Before you send anyone a link to your form, always preview the link in a guest browser window. So that'll be a window where you are not signed in to your Google account. And that'll be what it would look like if a student clicks on your link that you just text them or they get from WhatsApp or a non-school district email. That allows you to make sure that the person you're sending the link to can actually access the form. They don't get that annoying message that says, you know, restricted access, you must belong to this organization. And I also had a bad experience early in the pandemic. The organization I was working for was trying to use Google Forms as like a registration intake form for new students. And a link with overly broad permissions was shared. And so people who clicked on that link were actually, they had access, if they knew how, to edit the form and see all the responses. So people's contact information and such. Obviously, we don't want that shared with the whole world. So preview that to make sure that your users can access the form and then also that they have the correct level of access. And just to make sure that the form looks the way you want it to, because sometimes when you're in editing it, it doesn't look exactly the same as it would for someone who is filling it out. Susan, I wonder if you want to talk about that extension to show the get notifications while I try to fix my settings so I can actually share what it looks like in my Google Classroom.
You bet. I can do that. All right. So I'm going to escape out of the slide deck here, go back over to the form. So one of the things that I find is really helpful is getting an email notification when somebody completes my form, because I often have them up for long periods of time and I'm not checking them every day. That is a basic setting in Google Forms now. It didn't used to be, but it's not quite as sophisticated as the plugin that I use. So I'm going to show you both. So if you go into the settings for your form and you open this responses section up, wait, no, not responses. Where is it? Now not finding it. Why am I not finding it? Here it is. It's on the responses page under the 3 dots. It's get email notifications for new responses. So that is just a real basic email notification function that's been added into Google Forms recently. But it has some limitations. One, it will only email the email address for the Google account that built the form. I have another plugin that I use where you can email multiple email addresses, which is very helpful for us on the distance learning team because I don't want all the form responses coming to my personal email account. I want them going to the distance learning support desk email. So the plugin is more useful that way for me, but also you can set it to only email when you get 10 responses or 5 responses or something like that, instead of every single individual response. So if you are collecting large quantities of feedback, like our volunteer survey now that's going out to hundreds of people, and maybe I don't want to get an email every single time, right? That's going to be a lot of email. So I use a plugin, and you'll find those in your Google Forms under this little puzzle piece that's called add-ons. And I already have form notifications as an add-on. If you don't have it, when you open up the puzzle piece, you will find like the store or the plugin selections, right? And then you can look for this one called form notifications. And I want to open that up, and it pops up in this little sidebar window here, and I can configure the notifications specifically for every form that I use, and I can either have it notify me or not. If I turn on notification, I can put in the email address or addresses that I want it to notify. By default, it goes to the email address that built the form, but I don't have to keep that there. If I want it to go to the Zendesk account, I can do that. And then here, how often do I want to receive a notification? By default, it's to every 10 completions, it will notify me. I can set that to 1, I could set it to 20, however often I want to get notified. And then I can also put in a thank you email if I want to do that. And then that way you can follow up with the people who completed your form. So when you fill out, have a person submit a form, they automatically get a little pop-up on the screen saying, thank you for filling out the form. But if you also want to send them an email follow-up, this form notifications will allow you to do that. And you can customize this text to whatever you want it to say, up to 5,000 characters. So I really like that form notifications plugin. If you're looking for plugins and you don't have any, go into your little 3 dots menu, go to add-ons, and you can just go in here and browse around and see what kind of add-ons you want to get for your Google Forms. And the one that I'm using is called form notifications. We got any questions about that? All right, there's a question here from Lorna saying, in the past, I have set the quiz so that students receive an email with all of the questions and their answers. Not sure if I remember how I did that. I think you're going to find that in the settings, if we make it a quiz, and then you can let them see immediately, or you can, I think after manual review, and then you have to collect email addresses for that. So I think it might be this one here that you're looking for, Lorna, because you need to collect an email address in order to have it send it back to them.
There is, yeah, that one send respond, there's a copy of their response.
Yep, right here. There we go. When requested or always. There we go. But you do have to collect email addresses. Otherwise, obviously it can't function.
Mhm. And I would recommend doing that anytime you want to give your students feedback on something. I have accidentally, playing around with settings, not had that enabled, and then I wasn't able to even see who had submitted which responses. So
Yep.
Another important reason why you should preview your forms.
Yes, always good to try it before you send it to people. One other thing is the response that folks get after they fill out the form. Trying to remember where that is now. They've moved it around. It used to be here in settings. Do you remember where it is now, Elizabeth? They've moved it. It's not here anymore.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the chat. Which one are you looking for?
The thing that pops up when they complete the form saying thank you for filling out the form. It
Oh,
used to be in
yeah.
settings. It's not there anymore. Do you remember where they put it?
Yeah, if you go down in the settings, I believe it's under responses. No, it must be presentation. Under that presentation.
Oh, it's
menu.
under presentation.
Yeah.
That's where it is. Yep.
And then
Yes.
there's the
So there's a
confirmation
confirmation message. Yeah. And then you can edit that. You can change it to something like right? Instead of the default thank you, or your response has been submitted. So Elizabeth, are you able to show your?
I think so, although we're really short on time, but let me, oh, and then, no, I think it's just not gonna work today, I'm sorry.
Not gonna work, oh no. But I can maybe cover a little bit of it. Although I think folks have probably got the basics of how to add questions, but I will show you the basics from here. And then if you've got other questions, you can drop them in the chat. So actually, you know what? I'm going to go over to Google Drive and start a whole new one so you can see that from the beginning. So here I am in my Google Drive. I'm going to start a new document. If you don't see forms listed under new, look under more. If you haven't used it very much, it might not just be available to you on the menu by itself. So you might have to look under more. Click on Google Forms, and you start out with a really empty shell. It's an untitled form with no description. By default, they collect email addresses. You can turn that off in your settings. And then you start with one blank question. And here are your different question types. So you can do those short answers like Elizabeth was showing with the short O sounds. You can do longer answers, multiple choice, checkboxes drop down. You can actually ask people to upload files. The linear scales, really complicated ones like multiple choice grids. You can also do a timestamp or a date stamp. So let's say I wanted to do a short answer. It would look like this. And then I put the question, the body of the question goes here. And actually, maybe that would be better as a long paragraph answer. You can make it required or not. If you don't want this question, you can trash it. If you want to make another one just like it, you can duplicate. If you wanted to put in a video or an image, those are from right here on this menu. And you can either upload your image if you have it, if you use Google Photos, you can import straight from your Google Photos. If you've got things in Google Drive, you can import from there. You can also do a Google image search right here. So if I wanted to put in Earth Day, because today is Earth Day, I could just Google image search that and insert that. So then that's part of my, my form. And I can give that picture a title. So this is a way you can embed media, and then you can put questions below the media that students would respond to. And then for those branching questions, you would need to add sections. So a section just pops up kind of looking like your basic section up at the top. And then it's untitled with no description, and you can just put this. Right. And so sometimes sections are nice, even if you don't want to do branching, if your form is fairly long and you don't want everything on one big long page, you want to break it up of 3 or 4 questions on each page, you can use sections to do that too. I know that's like a super quick how to add things, but it's pretty intuitive. The settings are more complicated than the building the questions, I think. Any other questions in the text chat we should be looking at, Elizabeth?
I was just replying to some questions about formatting, like adjusting the size of the picture or changing the font. And I find that you don't have a whole lot of control over formatting in Google Forms. Unfortunately, that is one of the drawbacks.
Definitely one of the drawbacks, yes. Like if you wanted to put links in, you can put links in these description boxes, but you can't put them in questions, just in the description boxes for questions, for example. All right, and I think we are just about at time. So I want to pop up the last slide in our slide deck and have Gail put the link in the chat, which is for the Google Educator Training Center. This is where you can go to learn more. So Google actually has a lot of training materials, documentation, and teaching ideas specifically for educators. And that's at the edu.google.com Teacher Center. So you can look for training on specific tools like Google Forms. You can also look for, here's a thing I want to do in my class. What tools would be a good way to accomplish that? It's a really great resource and pretty easy to navigate around. So I recommend going there to learn more if you are interested in using anything Google.
Yeah, and I will just mention, we do have an upcoming training on Google Classroom, and we can definitely talk more about forms and quizzes in the context of Google Classroom at that training. Yep.
I haven't got it up on the Atlas calendar yet, but I will next week. So watch for that in next week's ADE Connect. And I think that's all. We can probably turn off the recording.